Cheers, my little guzzlers. A little bit later than normal, but we've decided we're going to eat a little bit later. And what we're going to have tonight was going to be purely vegetarian, but then we decided we're going to have a little meat-based starter. So the main course is a Bhat, or Bhat, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. It's a Bhat curry, but the curry bit might be a bit dubious because that refers to a sort of vegetable curry that accompanies the main thing, which is the Bhat. Okay, and you may realise, being it's a dal or dal, it could be Indian, but it's not. It is a lentil dal, okay, but we're tonight eating Nepalese style. So I've got a couple of things I need to get going, but I've already started. I soaked the lentils, I washed them, soaked them a couple of hours, and they're now in that pot. Is about 200 grams of lentils, but it's a bit under that, and that's soaking in there. It's about 2 cups worth of lentils, and it's soaking in about 4 cups of water. Okay, well, soaking, it's boiling in there now. Okay, so I've got that boiling because we want them thoroughly cooked. And then what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the rest of the stuff that will end up going in that Bhat. And I'll explain that as we go along. But also, like I said, we're going to make a meat starter. We're making some little meat dumplings, Momos. Okay, so tonight it's welcome to Nepal, the Bhat curry and Momos, or rather it'd be the other way around. So this Momo, this dumpling, this is going to be a pork one. This is found typically in Nepal, Tibet and India. Pretty much the same thing. Actually, it looks a little bit like one of your little Chinese dumplings or Japanese dumplings. So we're going to make the dough up shortly. Before we do that, we're going to do the filling. Now, traditionally, it could be pork, chicken, goat, buffalo. If you're up in the Himalayan regions of Nepal, it could even be yak. We've got a bit of pork. I've got about 150 grams of minced pork there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some other ingredients, and we're just going to mix that all up. So for that, I've got 3 spring onions, okay, which I just need to obviously trim. I've got about generous teaspoon of freshly grated ginger. I've got a couple of couple of garlic cloves. Again, we're just going to chop all that up. I've got a largish green chilli, and I've got some fresh coriander. So all we're going to do, and an onion. That's probably a bit on the large size, so I'm probably going to only use about half of that. Get back here. Don't you spill my beer. We will want some onion to go in the dal. Oh, try to cut myself in. Remember, I've got my sharp knife here. So it won't go to waste. Okay. So we put that over there. So I'm now just going to get that prepared, and I'm going to chuck all those ingredients into that bowl with the mincing. The lentil, I've just turned that down to a nice simmer. So I'll get that ready, and then we'll move on to look at making the dumplings up. Now I've got my steamer out for that, and what I've done is I've lined the bottom of the steamer with some greaseproof paper, which I put some holes in because we don't want these sticking to the steamer. If you're doing it in a bamboo steamer, definitely line it. So that's got all those ingredients chopped up, and all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to mix it all together. Okay, and this will make about 10 little mini dumplings. Okay, some of the onion could have been chopped a bit finer, I think, but not so worried about that. Like I say, depending on which region in Nepal we came from, would depend on the ingredients. But to be honest, it doesn't have to be meat. You get cheese buns. There's a paneer, which obviously comes from like India. And then there's a hard cheese, which I can't remember how to pronounce, begins with C or something, which they could use. So it doesn't have to be meat, but we're making meat ones. We just fancied a bit of meat to go with it. So that's got that all mixed up. Like I say, that I want to divide into about 10, should be about 15 grams each. So I'm going to put that to one side, because the next thing I need to do is prepare me dough, which traditionally is like a wheat flour, simple flour and water dough, or I'll say flat flour and water, it's flour and oil. And we're going to mix that up and then roll them out into little, well, roll them into some balls and then flatten them into little circles. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a clear up, and then we'll get making our dough balls. So in there I've got 200 grams, excuse me, 200 grams of plain white flour, and I'll add a generous pinch of salt, and then we're going to add 5 tablespoons of sunflower oil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now just going to mix that in together, and I've got there 100 mils of water, which we will then add gradually, mix that in to make a nice sort of smooth, stretchy dough. So I mentioned we're going Nepalese, so for those ignorant members of my audience, which is just about most of you, Nepal is a landlocked country surrounded mainly by India. So, and the north of Nepal is Tibet, Chinese Tibet, and then all the other 3 sides is India. So Nepal, like I say, landlocked, but it's quite diverse in its geography. It's got fertile plains, well irrigated valleys, but also obviously it's got hills and mountains, and is home to 8 of the highest mountains in the world, one of which of course is Everest. Okay, which watched the film again last night, Everest. One that's based on the true story of the guy who, well, I better not say, but he's famous, or was famous, oops, might give us something away there, for taking people up, you know, their first ascent of Everest. So, as a result of all these different sort of parts of Nepal, the Nepalese cuisine can vary quite significantly, because it depends on which part you're in as to what they can grow. So cereal wise, they can grow wheat, but as they go higher up, that changes. So it means that the cereal that they have, the cereal part that they have with this dal bhat, will vary depending on where in Nepal they're cooking it. So I still need to get this, like I say, we need it so that we've got a nice dough that we can roll out. Okay, when I've got it to that consistency, I'm just going to cover it over and put it to one side to rest a little bit, and then we'll catch up with where we are with the rest of the dumplings and the dal bhat. So now we're going to switch back to making the dal bhat. So I've got a slightly bigger saucepan, because obviously the lentils are going to go in there and some other bits. So first off, I'm going to start by having about a tablespoon of ghee, and I'm just going to melt that down in a second. But what you're going to need is a large onion, finely chopped, whole bulb of garlic, peeled obviously, finely chopped, and we're going to put the onion and the garlic in with that melted ghee, along with some cumin seeds, a teaspoon of cumin seeds, and then we're going to heat that up and cook it through until the onions are nice and soft. Now you might have noticed I've got one of my nemesis things here, tomatoes. I was going to cheat and just put tomato puree in, but I thought no, bugger it. So I've peeled these because it's tomato skins there. So I've peeled these tomatoes, and we're going to chop them up finally, but they don't go in at this initial stage. So you want some of them. You'll want some grated ginger, only about a teaspoon this time. We're going to want 2 more green chilies. I might have to use some bird's eye ones. Bird eye ones, not bird's eye. There's fish fingers, isn't it? And some coriander. Okay, so we'll be adding them in stages. So what I'm going to do first off, I'm just going to chop the onion up and nice and fine. I'm going to cheat with the garlic. I'm going to add that. I'm going to chop that up in the garlic press. Okay, and then like I say, what we want to do is then get that heated up, the onion and the garlic and the cumin heated up, get the onion nice and soft and cooked through before we add the rest. Now I've switched to that. I've left the momos for a bit because obviously the momos are only going to take about 10 minutes in the steamer, but we'll want the dal, as it were. Actually, I keep saying the dal bhat I'm making. The bhat or bhat actually refers to the rice that's with it. Okay, and when I said to you like what they might accompany, well, I didn't say actually that, but did I? But I talked about the different cereals. Depending on what region it is, it might be rice. Sometimes they even use chapati instead. It just, again, a choice and where you lived. So I'm just going to get that fine a bit chopped up, and then I'm going to put that pan on. I've turned my lentils off because they're nice and soft now. We'll be draining them, but we will need to add some of the water back, and my beer's getting low. So anyway, these are cooking nicely. So what I've done here is I've chopped up my tomato and my green chilli. And what we're going to do is now just going to add that into there. I should have pointed out, by the way, that I did add the ginger. I forgot to mention earlier. I said to you there was a bit of ginger going into it. I added the ginger in with the onions. Like I say, about a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger. Now, what we want to do now is cook this down so that tomato goes nice and mushy, and the chilli goes nice and soft as well and mushy. So we're going to leave that doing that. Now, obviously the lentils will be going into there. We want some turmeric, bit of salt to taste, and then we just finish it off with some freshly chopped coriander, but that sort of goes on top when we're ready to serve. So really not much more we can do at this stage for this thing. So what I'm going to do is now going to prepare my dumplings. So I'm going to clean this board off, move it out of the way, and then we'll get doing our dumplings. And I made a little bit of an error earlier. Oh, I'm about to have a beer then, really, I ain't really left yet. I said you was going to make 10, it actually makes 20. I was thinking it actually makes 10 each, because there's only 2 of us. Whether we'll eat 10 or whether we'll put some by. So that's where we're at. I was telling you about Nepal, wasn't I? Nepal, it gets its name from an ancient sage, supposedly this is, called Ne. And this was the place he protected, and that therefore is how it became known as Nepal. Okay. There's also something else. Well, there's quite a few unusual things about Nepal. For instance, it's the only national flag in the world that's not rectangular. The design, like most flags, means things, but to be honest, I didn't bother writing that down. But yeah, it's the only national flag that ain't rectangular. Now someone will say, there's other flags that aren't rectangular. I said, national flag. All you clever asses out there trying to catch me up. So I'm just going to have a bit of clean up, get myself another beer, and we'll get making dumplings. Right, so the way I've divided this dough up, we've made 16, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll these out into little discs. Now, I can't do it with this rolling pin, too much fanning about, but traditionally they would be thicker in the middle to enable you to fold it all up and keep all the contents in there. So we basically just roll these out, okay, and then what we'll be doing is adding some filling, okay, to each one. Now I'm using a modern day steamer. Traditionally they would use something known as a Mach 2, which essentially was a steamer that they would normally put over the top of like the soup or stock pot. So technically speaking, well, not there's enough water in it, but over something like this that's cooking, and they would steam them that way. We're not, okay, we're going to use a proper steamer there. Probably doing in batches, it take about 10 minutes. Okay, now I was saying to you, I was steaming them, but sometimes, as well as steaming them afterwards, they might sort of pan fry them, or deep fry them. It's up to you. We're just going to steam them and have them like little steamed dumplings. Okay, so I'm just going to get a few more of these rolled, and then we'll fill some of them rolled out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about a teaspoon of this dumpling mix. Okay, might add a little bit more. End of the day, it doesn't matter if these are a little bit bigger. It's essentially just for us. And then you can either just fold all this up and squeeze it together at the top, okay, or you can fold it more like the other sort of dumpling and do an edge on it that way. And then we're just going to put that in the steamer. Like I say, I'm doing it on to a little bit of parchment paper or baking paper, just simply, made that one a bit big, so it doesn't stick and then be a pain when we're trying to remove it and split it and everything. You could, if you like, wet the edges if it's a bit floury like this is, just so that it sticks together. But essentially we're just going to do them, get them all done into the steamer, and then hopefully by then we'll be ready to move on to that. Now, I said to you we can do some rice, so I've got some rice washed, ready to go in the microwave. We're going to do it in the microwave. Okay. So like I say, you normally would accompany the dal with something like rice, hence the term Bhat or Bhat. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. But it doesn't have to be rice. You could have chapati, or you could boiled buckwheat or anything like that. Again, it would depend on where in Nepal you were, as to what was the main sort of cereal that you could grow. Now this is all then served on a thali or thali, okay, which is basically like a platter with your bowl of your dal, accompanied by some of your rice, and then traditionally there would be a vegetable curry, which is where the tahari comes from. Okay, we're having curried curry leaves, okay, which I've got out of a tin, and we'll be cooking that through shortly. And then you would traditionally accompany it with some pickled vegetables or some pickles. I'm going to have some nice lime pickle, because I love lime pickle. Wife hates it. Okay. So it's then served, like I say, on this platter, and you know, you then had a bit of everything. So we're going to have obviously these dumplings to start with. So I'm just going to finish off doing my dumplings, and then hopefully by then that will have softened down enough. So I've drained the lentils, but I've kept the water because obviously this is a bit like a soup, and so we're going to want some of that. So we'll tip the lentils back in there. Okay, mix them in, and then we're going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. That'll do. Mix that in, and then I'm going to add some of that boiling water back to that. Stir that in, and then I'm just going to put that on that back burner. Might want to add a little bit more, and we're then just going to carry on cooking that. Basically, most of it is all cooked through. Some of the tomato hasn't quite gone all mushy yet, but we're just going to keep that cooking through. I'll move it on the back burner so you can actually see what I'm doing here. And like I say, I'm just going to keep that just in case I need to top that up with anything else. I've got my curry leaves in here. Just need a spoon. I'll start heating that up. I'll put the timer on in a bit shortly for my steamer. About 15 minutes I'm going to give these. I've made 12 in the end. I've also got some rice to go in the microwave. That's 15-minute cook. So the only other remaining thing to do is make a little bit of a dipping sauce for these momos. So I'm just going to make sure I've got the stuff for that, and then we'll get momo dipping, well, dipping sauce. Yeah. So I'm going to grate a little bit more ginger into this little bowl. So I'm going to make my dipping sauce. And then I've got about 3 spring onions, and I've got one little bird eye chilli. I'm going to chop all that up fine, and that's going to go in there. We're going to mix that with some soy sauce and a pinch of sugar, and that will make up dipping sauce. Now you could have like a satay sauce. Well, I didn't want that too fatty. Or any kind of tomato based chutney, but we're just going to have this simple soy dipping sauce. So my rice is on. I'm now just going to put my steamer on. Okay, this is cooking nicely at the moment. My veg curry is catching nicely on the bottom of the pan. I might have to add a little bit of oil to that, I think. So we're starting to get ready to be able to start eating soon. Really good job too. So there's my dipping sauce ready to go. They're on there, still got a little while to go yet. I'm drinking beer. Now obviously it's not the right sort of beer, and you might be saying, well, hang on, do they drink beer in Nepal? Well, actually it depends. Beer aside, Nepal can be quite a lot of it in the vegetarians. Okay. Not as big vegetarians as India, but that's partly because Nepal is quite multicultural, multilingual, multicultural, and so certain parts of it, like, horrified at the thought of eating meat, other parts don't care. So sometimes these are all purely vegetarian. Like I say, essentially what we're going to eat for the main course is all vegetarian. I'm not sure if it's quite vegan. Well, it won't be because it's got ghee in it, and I should imagine that curry vegetable or curry leaves has probably got ghee in that. So it's definitely vegetarian, but probably but not vegan. Excuse me. But traditionally, what they would drink with it would be tea or buttermilk. or depending which region you was in, different types of alcohol. So like rice wine, a type of beer, what was beer? Rice beer as well, and actually a beer made from millet. Again, it depended on where, the altitude that you lived in Nepal, as to what your main cereal was and what you could use. Cutting away from the chat about Nepal, I've chopped up fresh coriander, which will go on that. So really, we're just waiting for our little dumplings, and then we'll be trying them out with our dipping sauces, and then we'll be going on and assembling the main course. So while we're waiting for that, can't really talk about Nepal without mentioning the Gurkhas. Now, Gurkhas, the British first came across the Gurkhas when they were fighting against them in 1814, when it was the Anglo-Nepal or Nepalese war. Typical bloody British trying to take over everywhere. But the British were really sort of like, whoa, these Gurkhas, they're so professional, they're very honourable, their military tactics are second to none. And so they started around about 1815 actually recruiting Gurkhas to the British Army. In 1816, when they formed the peace treaty, they could formally ask the Gurkhas to join them, and ever since the Gurkhas have been part of the British Army. Nepal is currently Britain's oldest ally in Asia. Now, the other thing with the Gurkha's famous for their big, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, curried or whatever, the big knife curved blade. Now, if a Gurkha was to remove his knife in anger, he was forbidden to return it to its sheath until it had tasted blood. And if there was nobody to chop up with it, then he would have to cut himself so that it was blooded, because he couldn't remove his knife in anger. You can remove it, they used to use it as cooking implement, things like that, but if he removed it in anger, it had to taste blood before it could go back. No blood in this side, although I did try and cut myself earlier. So that should be the dumplings done. Let's try cutting it open. It looks like it's done. Try a bit of pork. Yep, nicely hot. Onions still obviously quite nice and crisp. Let's just try it with a little bit of a sauce on it. Whoops, come here. I'm not really getting a chilli. Remember, there's chilli in this and also in the dipping sauce. It's quite doughy. Okay, you might want to cook it a bit longer, but what you've got to be careful of is you don't want them too soggy. Okay. They then start getting sticky, and they also got a bit of chilli in that bit. They get sticky, and then they'll tend to split, especially when you try and move the steamer. So that's your Nepalese pork momos. You said trying to choke on a bit of it. So here we go. We've got our dal, the bhat, the rice. I've got the vegetable, the vegetable curry, which is in this case curried curry leaves, and I've got a little bit of lime pickle because, like I said, it's meant to be accompanied with normally a pickle. So let's have a taste of the dal. It's probably a bit hot. So it's a sort of like soupy, it's very soft. Just had my dumplings with that sauce, which did have a bit of heat to it. So I think that's a little bit overpowered my taste buds at the minute. So that's just like your typical, almost like lentil soup. That's the not, I wouldn't say overpowering any curry, but I suspect that's got curry powder in that. The taste of curry powder is coming through. Just plain basmati rice. And in my case, a little bit of lime pickle, because the wife don't like lime pickle, so she's got double veg. And there you go then, your typical Nepalese thali, which is a dal bhat takari, or takari, don't know.